Welcome and thank you for joining us today for another reality shifting interview. To your benefit, dear listener, I'm interviewing a client of mine who's been working with me for a few months now, and her name is Jessa. We first met about 2 months ago when she started by reaching out regarding my professional magical services. And at some point, she asked some questions about spiritual afflictions and we had a discussion about it. Little did I know what would come next. And I will leave her to tell you her truly inspirational story of superhuman perseverance, courage, and true inner strength. I say this because Jessa is an independent woman, a successful female entrepreneur, and an all in all, genuinely kind person. So, thank you, Jessa, for doing this interview to help raise people's awareness about the stigma around spiritual afflictions, magic, and spirituality in general. Now, to start, could you please share with us how you realized you had a spiritual affliction, what kind of symptoms or problems you were dealing with?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the introduction, Retta. Thanks for having me. So basically, how I came to realize I had a spiritual affliction. So I have known that something's wrong for a very long time. I mean, all throughout my life, there were these super repetitive problems that I couldn't seem to shake. And it led to a lot of trauma and then a lot of like co-creation on my behalf of more kind of toxic life experiences, which just created this vicious pattern. For a long time, I thought that it was just, me. And as time went on and I started to explore spirituality in my mid-20s, I started to consider that it might be other things. And basically, when I started to explore a magical practice, that's when I started to become suspicious that there was maybe something like a curse or some sort of spiritual affliction that was outside of my control. Ironically, actually, in my mid-20s, when I spent 3.5, nearly 4 months at this yoga center, I was actually told by two different people during that time that I had a demon in my belly, two completely unrelated people, which freaked me out, but also felt accurate. And at some point, I kind of felt like it left.
Interesting. So, you've had issues all throughout your life, but now you're saying that it's only when you started getting into magic and studying it, practicing it, that you started to think there was some curse attached to you, correct? But before getting into magic, because I know from our personal exchanges that you have been spiritual for a very long time, right? Even before getting into magic. But all that time, you didn't ever think there was some kind of demonic affliction or attachment involved in the equation, correct?
Yeah. So I grew up in a very religious household until our family kind of collectively left that behind, though it took a long time to kind of unindoctrinate ourselves from the Christian perspective that we'd grown up with. And so much of the particular sect of Christianity we were involved in was like obsessed with demons, like obsessed with talking about demons and fearing demons. And there was even like a child's book series that was supposed to be like, there was like R.L. Stein and all of these scary mainstream horror books for kids that were big in the 90s. They came out with this Christian line of books. And so it was a way to, I guess, indulge in that type of literature or whatever as a kid. But it was all about Christians battling demons.
For kids. Bedtime stories, correct?
Bedtime stories, exactly.
And
Yeah.
then she slew the demon. Good night. Go to bed. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I was certainly grew up being aware of the presence of demons, but then until I started exploring spirituality, I kind of let go of that even existing. So when I had been told that I had these demons in my stomach, I mean, yeah, I believed that, but I guess I didn't really understand how deep it could go.
Something that comes to mind, you're mentioning the Christian demonic stories for kids, but it's funny you mentioned that because just a couple months ago, I've seen someone post about Goetia for kids, and it was these,
Wow.
yeah, and many people made the comment that people are too young for that stuff, to be, and it made demons seem like these friendly monsters, and
Uh,
it's basically to initiate kids to work with the Goetia spirits, which I think is completely wrong, just as
yeah,
wrong as scaring people from that reality. And this is in your case in the Christian context, but I mean, being a Muslim, it's not very different. It's like, beware of the demons and beware of this and the Satans, and they will get you, and always, this fear mentality, which I think has good intentions behind it, but ultimately ends up turning people away from anything spiritual, anything religious, so on and so forth. So it's a pattern that I see over and over again, whereas people want to raise people's awareness, but they do it the wrong way. Many times it's
right.
not about the message, but really about the delivery. So I thank you for sharing with us about, how you discovered that, okay, maybe there's something external about my situation. It is not just me dealing with regular people problems. Um, but what kind of problems were you dealing with? I mean, these people, they saw a demon in your stomach, but what kind of issues were you dealing with on the day to day, just to
Mhm.
situate people who might be dealing with the same issues as you are, but not really seeing the patterns?
Absolutely. So there are things that also have plagued my entire family. But for example, with the church, we were actually decided to leave the church. But the unfortunate part of that is that we had been living in a 4 block radius of the church in a neighborhood with all the other church members. It's just
That
like a
doesn't work too well.
no, it doesn't. So when you decide to leave, but you stay living in the same place, it makes for a very awful situation. And
Absolutely.
we were um, we were just shunned and scapegoated, and it was this very traumatic experience that took place over a couple of years. And that was a pattern I have found recreated in my life over and over again. Um, Groups of people like turning on me.
Mm, interesting. So
Yeah.
group rejection, kind of like the caricatural, like people getting together and just finger pointing you. And
Yes, absolutely. Like just extreme ostracism. And it would happen over and over and over again. And there was a part of me, I guess, when I started exploring therapy and stuff like that, that thought that maybe this original trauma had essentially caused me to subconsciously seek out this pattern. And so working on the stuff that had happened with the church was something that definitely became a focus, but yet the issue never cleared up.
yes, I totally see what you're trying to picture here. And of course, it's very sad because, therapy, although there is a part of it which is therapeutic, a lot of it involves reliving past traumas in the hope that just reliving it over and over again is going to clear, whatever baggage or
Mm-hmm.
trauma there is. But unfortunately, it rarely works.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And especially when it comes to trauma. And I think that even the mainstream psych community is starting to acknowledge that more, which is like why there's like EMDR and different types of therapies that are more about targeting the trauma in indirect ways rather than just talking about it, because I think it's definitely been found that actually like exactly reliving traumatic experiences over and over and over again just keeps you stuck in that feedback loop. And there really is a lot to say about how we perceive a trauma as well.
Something that you mentioned, which piques my interest, is about, all these alternative therapies, because as I said at the beginning, you were just asking questions about possible spiritual afflictions. But as time went on and we discussed many things, like you have tried a lot, you have sought an answer. And,
Yeah.
of course, I'm sure you've seen different people regards to that. What kind of insights, apart from the people who told you there's a demon in your belly, like what
Mhm.
kind of insights, what kind of diagnosis were you getting around your issues when you're looking for an answer about really what is afflicting you?
Yeah. So um, I think that I would come up with different ideas of what it could be. And then I would seek out people who sought those specific things. So I wasn't often going to people just being like, what's my problem? And then them kind of handing me a diagnosis. It was more like I would sit there and I would do my research and I would plumb the depths of it and then go and find somebody who treated that specifically. And I really did try everything. I was just like talking with my friend who actually you are now going to be treating as well. And we're saying that we should start a little mini podcast where we tell stories of all of the different treatments we've tried, because between the two of us, I'm pretty sure we've left no stone unturned.
I think that's a great idea. And I see so many people nowadays, so-called healers, or I don't even know why they call themselves healers, because they're not actually doing any healing. They're just, perpetuating a cycle of suffering that they have suffered. And now they're acknowledging other people's suffering and they think that's somehow healing, kind of like just
Right.
therapy, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but I think that's a great idea, and this is not so two women could go over what they have tried, but really to raise people's awareness. Like there's all this stuff and it might or might not work for you. And if it doesn't, well, there's a reason behind it. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
like,
Yes. If it doesn't work, it's not a failure on your part. It just means it's the wrong solution.
absolutely. And, you've sought an answer. And I like the fact, I like the way that you proceeded. You didn't proceed like going to one person after another and be like, hey, can you figure out what my problem is? You informed yourself, you done your research, and then you find someone who's somewhat reputable to see if that is your problem and their solution could correspond to what you think it is, correct? Like
Right.
you were making your own hypotheses about what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's how like anybody who's like even therapists and stuff like that, that's kind of like the therapist I've gravitated towards who like let me kind of spearhead that. Because that's a lot of that can really fuck you up if you're going to a lot of different people and they're like, here's what's wrong with you. Like that can really start to do a number and really eat away at like any remaining part of your core identity. You know what I mean?
Most definitely. I cannot even emphasize that enough, because so many people, they get to me and they've been through so many other practitioners, healers, and whatever, and they're like, this person told me I have a generational curse, this person told me I have this, and this person, and even you, I mean, you mentioned other people telling you that they have seen messages or something in your aura field and something
Yeah.
in your karma and something with your ancestors, and it
Yeah.
goes on and on and on. And the person at some point gets stuck in this circle of uncertainty and going around in, a vicious circle of one problem to the next. And how could
Yeah.
you even start to solve an issue if you don't even know what it is, because each person just paints it in their own colors. And in your case, it's not just thinking, oh, I have this problem and then sitting with it. Like you have actually done the work. From all of my clients, I was impressed with the amount of work that you've done and the amount
Mm.
of effort that you put in. But in order to just save people a little bit of time, money, and really just the hassle, what have you tried that worked and what didn't at
Yeah,
all? And
sure.
how long would the effects usually last for you?
So by the time that I arrived to that yoga center in Mexico, I was a fucking mess. Like I had been just kind of like I'd been running around like a maniac in my teens and early 20s, just like I don't know if I ever had a moment of presence during that time. Like I was just like running around, like constant stimulation, like hanging out with friends and doing crazy things all the time and then something changed in me and became, and I still can't really pinpoint what that change was. All of that fight and that manic energy kind of just left the room. And what was left behind was all of the pain without the intensity. Yeah, by the time I got to that yoga center, I was in pretty bad shape. I could clear a room. My energy was so heavy. And I had quite a few suicide attempts under my belt at that point and like was dealing with serious mental health problems. And um, yeah, I was just so gloomy. You know, I even look at pictures of me from that time and it's just like you can see just this like heavy cloud hanging over me. And I did so many things at that yoga center and had a lot of really cool supernatural experiences too. Like I remember doing this, like we had this whole heart opening class one day. So we started off with like a heart opening meditation, and then we were doing asanas that were all for our heart chakras. And then the teacher had us sit in these two circles, one inside of the other. And then we were supposed to take 2.5 minutes to initiate and also receive, staring into the other person's eyes. And I had actually been in a group therapy session about 6 months prior to this, where they actually had us try to do an eye gazing exercise, and I literally couldn't do it. And so confronting this, I mean, this lasted hours we were doing this for. And after that experience, all of the skin on both of my hands just started to peel away. And there was never any raw skin underneath. It was just like dead skin just coming off in layers. And there were all of these different things that I was doing, like ayahuasca ceremonies and drum journeys and these different cleansing and purification techniques and meditation retreats and stuff like that. And honestly, I left there so much lighter. And a lot of the practices and a lot of the things that I did really did help. But they didn't help enough. They didn't get to the root of it. But I'm very convinced that if I hadn't sought out those practices, that I probably wouldn't be alive. It was like they were enough to kind of chip away at some of the heavier things that were like crushing me, but the major patterns and issues just wouldn't clear up.
A lot of what you're mentioning really resonates with me
Mm.
and the patterns that I've observed from just dealing with so many different people. You know, we all have our own ways of dealing with suffering. Some ways are healthier than others. You know, for people, it might be drugs. For other people, it might be alcohol. It might be other things, all kinds of addictions. And in your case, maybe it was just this constant movement and going from one place to another and being with friends and going on adventures. And at some point, you say, this doesn't work or hasn't taken away, or it's basically just a distraction. Is that correct? Do you
Yeah.
feel that that was the case? And also, I'm curious to know if all that movement, all that stuff that you were going through, do you feel that you were in control, or that a path was kind of being traced for you, and that, you know, your life was taking you in unexpected places in some case?
Right. That's a really good question. So as far as that being a distraction, yes, absolutely. But I'm not sure that I ever even had a clear thought at that time. Like my early teens were incredibly traumatic. I was put in foster care and dealt with a sexual assault, and I went through some truly heinous things during that time. So yeah, I mean, in my early 20s and stuff like that, when I was just like running around like a chicken with my head cut off, there was never any like clarity. Luckily, my ways of coping were never really that unhealthy. I mean, we all drank a ton, for sure. But I mean, other than that, there was never drugs. It was like never a nightclub scene or anything like that. It was just like house parties where we'd like wear costumes and like just be like silly and loud and stuff like that. And
And I don't mean to bring up any kind of bad memories. Of course, like there's a lot of emotional baggage attached to it. And I appreciate you sharing about that, about what you have tried. So you mentioned the yoga center. I think the yoga center in Mexico for you was a huge event. I mean, still, I mean, it's a very important experience to go to a yoga center for like what you said, 3.5, 4 months.
yeah.
So that must have been a marking event. But apart from that yoga center, I know that you have tried a lot. Do you feel that there are other things that you've had moderate success with or no success at all that you just want to make sure that the viewers are aware, like, if it's something like this, don't even bother. Or if
Yeah.
it's something like that, you could try this.
I really believe that any tool that's been developed has been developed because it worked for somebody. And I think that it's a matter of just kind of, I mean, bottom line is if you have a demonic possession or a curse or something on you, those things will never cure it. But if you're just somebody with issues and with traumas and things that you need to work through, and you want to grow, all of those tools are fantastic. And we know when something's not working, we can feel it.
And I honestly believe that as well. I mean, if something becomes a thing and people use it, it's because it's worked. It has demonstrated positive effects. You just have to find the right thing for you. And
Yeah,
what I'm getting from you is that you were just going by process of elimination and doing your research and going from one thing to the other until you find something that worked.
totally.
Now, when you got to me, you didn't mention all this stuff. You're just like, hey, what do you think about this? And I was like, well, you know what? I start all my clients with a diagnosis because we have to figure it out what it is,
Mhm.
instead of just um, making hypotheses or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our first meeting. Do you remember that meeting? What stuck with you from it and why?
Yeah, absolutely I do. Um, so I had reached out to contact you about um, the this guy that I had been dating, and the magic that was done was so rapid and so illuminating. I've literally, the solution presented itself like a magical portal. It was like in like the hero's journey in some movie, and there's like, you can see the path being illuminated like with a light from above. Like that's literally what it felt like, the way the true situation was presented. So at that point, I had been last year I had actually sought out a few different curse removals. And first, I'd actually contacted this shaman who, talk about possession. Oh my God, this guy was psychotic. I did my research. He was on like the shamanic like database, the US database. So he was
There's
well.
a database.
He's in
That
the.
sounds wrong on so many levels. Rate your shaman.
It was not like a star review system, but it was like, like people who are respected in the field were on this list. And yeah, so I mean, I reached out to him because this was one of the things that he specialized in. And he wanted to actually just do a reading. And we're kind of like, where I thought we were opening with a reading. And then I'm starting to realize that there's no curse removal happening. And I asked him about it. He just ignored me and continued on with the reading. And basically, to make a long story short, this guy ended up like coming back to me and like telling me that I was using all of the sensitive information he'd taken from me during this reading and throwing it in my face, and telling me how I was defiant and difficult, and my problems would never be solved if blah, 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 blah. Like, it was a very crazy experience. I've never had somebody, a healer, like try to provoke me and hurt me in quite the way that he did. So that was interesting. The next person I sought out was this woman who ended up doing this like 3-hour long, journey where she was basically looking at all these ravaged parts of myself. And she was so traumatized when she came out of that. It was like, I don't think she didn't want to work with me again. She was just kind of like, okay, bye. And after that,
gently showing you the door, like
totally. Oh my gosh. So
I wish you the best.
I wish you the best. Yeah, she wasn't quite that blunt about it, but you could tell that this is like above her pay grade kind of thing, you know. So and then I had a curse removal done by a magical practitioner, and I felt something. It was happening in somewhere in like a 4-week window, and I woke up. I went to bed early on like a Sunday because I was feeling so crappy, and I woke up at like 4 a.m, and I felt almost like a blob of jello just melting off of my brain, and then it like came into my mouth like a big ball of phlegm. And I went and spat it out, and I was just like, it felt so nauseous. And I was like, I bet he's doing the curse removal now. And I contacted him, and sure enough, it all aligned. And I felt a little better, but I mean, it came back, you know, and yeah, I mean, ultimately it wasn't a permanent solution. So I'd kind of given up on the whole curse thing for a minute, just based off of those 3 experiences. But then so many bad things were happening to me again this year. I haven't told you this, Retta, but so I bought a piece of land upstate with the intention of building short-term vacation rentals on it. And I had put in a ton of legwork and had hired some really fantastic people for the project. But this piece of land that I bought, it turned out to be a piece of contested family land. Oh my God, it was so intense. And it was just a saga that would not end. And I was just so many things. And then this thing that happened with that guy that I had been involved with, and then crazy things, you know, like I found what I thought was a bomb, like in a bag in the subway station. And I was just meeting a lot of tricksters and people who were just bad news. And I felt like that was the only thing coming into my reality. And it was just becoming too much. And this had all been too much for quite some time, but I really reached a breaking point. And this thing that went down with the guy, it's pretty up there in like major betrayals. Yeah. This is somebody that I had taken in. I mean, I wasn't even romantically involved with him, and hadn't been at some point for quite some time at this point, but this is somebody who I really taken in as like family. And that was a very painful situation. So when I went on your website and I saw that you did spiritual diagnosis, and I was like, okay, we're doing this. And the questions that you asked me were very specific, and they definitely made me think.
When you have done the curse removal, was it after that things took on kind of like even worse manifestations, like you said, you know, finding a bomb, the thing with the land? Was it after the curse removal or before?
So I was dealing with kind of an array of problems when I first started the spiritual journey. And there was my crippling depression that would leave me like bedridden for weeks, like sometimes months on end. There was like extreme poverty.
Did you know that the majority of mental problems and even many health issues have spiritual origins? Spiritual health is as important, if not more important, than physical health. Book your spiritual diagnosis now.
Jobs that I took, I always had to work for myself, because when you are somebody who's constantly finding themselves in situations where they're being bullied and ostracized, what better what better
Yeah.
place than a workspace, right? Than a workplace for that to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
but from universal grace, I was able to work through both of those problems, and they left. And I don't really know how or why, but they did. And it's almost like these spirits were now focusing on my one remaining issue and just turning up the dial. It was like all of their focus now went to the issue that hadn't been cleared up. And I started getting really into black magic at some point a couple years ago. And the first time I ever did black magic was like when I did a tongue binding spell on this girl who was, you know, had took out a social hit on me in this industry that I was in. And um, I had a lot of success with this tongue binding spell. I remember it was like there was a cruelty to it too, like you have this massive, this very long cow tongue, and you're slicing it up with a razor blade and putting cayenne pepper and urine on it and tying it up. You know what I mean? There was like a cruelty to it for sure. And it worked for a minute, but I could feel the day that she broke. And from that point on, I started to kind of dabble. It felt like a way of taking back control of my life. And I didn't want to work with entities that were going to maybe take their time. I wanted entities that were going to work quickly, and demons were doing that. But definitely, I think that was when my problems also started to accelerate.
I remember very clearly your result was the jinn's touch, which basically means that at some point a jinn hit you or touch you, which is a very common thing to happen.
Okay.
But what we couldn't pinpoint was when it actually happened. And that's
Right.
because at that moment you were a baby.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult in the spur of the moment to remember, like, okay, that's the day, because I asked my clients, like, okay, when's the day everything changed? And
Mhm.
it's to know what stage of the treatment you need. We definitely knew what was going on, but we didn't know how long ago it started. And then afterwards, you remembered. And the thing that you mentioned about magic is very interesting. And of course, we're going to come back to it later. Now, you have gotten the diagnosis,
Mhm.
and I tell you, like, okay, this is what happens. And I explain to you what the jinn touch is. But for me, it's not enough to just do the diagnosis, because I know that the spirits and the demons and whatever we want to call them, jinns, they have a way of guiding people or to shape their perception to see things a certain way. And that's why I make it a point with every single client who has a positive diagnosis to confirm it for them through a recitation that I perform. Do you
Yeah.
remember that experience of that recitation, how you felt during and after? Because it did produce some
Yes.
immediate effects on you.
So the first thing I noticed was why my left ear blocked up. It became really full, and then it kind of popped. And that was just before you were about to start the prayer. And I remember I mentioned that to you, and you asked me whether it popped in or out, and you said that had just kind of fled. And interestingly, when we started treatment, that was also the same ear, and the same way another one left. And I've actually had a lot of issues with my ears over the years. For some reason, that must be some sort of portal. I don't know if that's super common, or if they particularly liked being in my ears. I mean, it makes sense because they were always talking at me. So
It's actually one of the signs of spirit presence that we look for in Arabic magic. When you're dealing with jinns, you look for an ear pop. It's something that I tell my students to look for, and it doesn't happen to everyone. And it's an ear pop for people who don't know what we mean. It's like when you get on a plane and the pressure changes.
yeah,
That's exactly how it feels.
yeah.
If you live in a tall building, that's not supposed to happen. And if it's something that happens over and over again, it means something is coming in and out. And you'll feel also, if you pay close attention to it, that your demeanor changes at that point, or that
Mm-hmm.
even other people's demeanor will change around you at that point. So it's very, very important.
Interesting.
And yeah, I've had that experience happen a number of times with the clients during the diagnosis. I remember also you mentioning that you felt the colors got brighter
Yes.
and you felt lighter. So at that point, it's not like, oh, this is you or emotional baggage or,
Mhm.
subconscious programming. This is a thing. So of course you were willing to go through with the treatment because I mean you were seeking a solution, so we
Mhm.
started that. You were a bit skeptical, and I think with reason
Mhm.
and understandable considering everything you've tried in the past.
Mhm.
But as you went along through the treatment, what made you think this was different from your previous attempts at healing?
So right away, there were some supernatural occurrences. And when I first sprayed that water, when that water came in, when my friend came in from out of town at the same day, and so I opened that package, and I wasn't able to do the full treatment, like because I'd already showered and stuff like that. But I just tried to spray some. I wanted to feel it, and I thought it was going to maybe feel like similar to like Florida water or something like this. But oh my gosh, did it pack a it packed a punch. It was so powerful. And I just felt immediately just this peace settle over my brain. And we were going to a concert that night. And anyways, I ended up like getting in a fight with somebody. I won't get into details, whatever, it was dumb. But it felt like it had been like demonically orchestrated a little bit. And I was so aware of how frequently this was happening around me all the time. The difference was is that it didn't really emotionally impact either of us. And I had sprayed some on my friend who is not into this stuff at all. And he was kind of like, oh my God, like, what is in that water? He stopped mid-sentence. I kind of sprayed him and he stopped speaking mid-sentence and was just like, what's in that?
People
So
are always surprised because it's really like it has no ingredients, no herbs, nothing. It's basically just pure water and
blessed water,
no
basically.
yeah, exactly. No
Yeah.
sense. It's all like energetically done, and blessed, as you said. And people they're like, oh, it's just water, but once you try it, you see
Yeah.
that it's much more than just that. And it's funny
Yeah.
that we use water to burn spirits, right? Still paradoxical to me. But it's definitely right. um Goes to speak to your level of perception. At that point the spirits are mad, they're pissed off, and
Right.
if they can't touch you, they can surely touch other people around you to
Yeah.
negatively affect you and mess up your night. And with the water it didn't.
Yeah.
It was just another thing because it could have been very upsetting
Right.
and escalating even further than it
Yeah.
did, but it just didn't.
The interesting thing is I'd only sprayed it on my head, like, a misting over my head. I hadn't put it anywhere else in my body.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
were they were pretty mad. They were pretty
Yeah.
mad, but
Yeah.
just that mist over your brain, it kind
Yes.
of helped you deal. It's
Yes.
symbolic because everything that happened and how you reacted, it's basically
Yeah.
just from your thoughts, and you kept yourself from doing it. And I think that's
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
But that's the first night you got the treatment and you sprayed it, and along the line, because you did a total of 4 weeks,
I
what
did.
did you notice? Because we kept close communication and you were keeping me up to date with what
Yeah.
happened. I remember that something very significant happened around the 7 days mark, which happens for many of the clients
Mm.
that I deal with.
Right.
But what are some other
Other things.
improvements? Yeah.
Okay. So, well, my friend saw two spirits in the room with us that weekend. There was, they were benevolent spirits. I mean, he'd never seen spirits before. So that was
So
interesting.
that's the friend who's not spiritual at
Yeah.
all.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very
Interesting.
interesting.
And how did he know they were benevolent spirits?
He could just feel them.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't describe them as benevolent. I asked, I was like, were they scary? And he said, no.
Very
So
interesting.
very interesting,
It's not just water.
right? Yeah.
Uh,
So that was really affirming. I was really grateful for that. So some of the other things that happened, I mean, I kept a daily journal, and one of the things that I immediately, noticed was that I felt like I had control of my brain back. And that doing the treatment was just like, it was my favorite part of the day. It was like how you'd feel after spending, like 8 hours at a spa, when you like leave the spa, that moment where you're just very relaxed. That's what I would feel like after the treatment. And it was like the first time I'd felt that level of peace. And so it was just really something to look forward to every day. And I mean, it would last, but it was like always strongest, like right when I put it on. And then there was this thing with my cat. I had actually forgotten that you told me this, because one of my concerns was that, well, I mean, are these things going to come out of me and go into my cats? And you had said, no, only if, no, they'll be fine. But if your cat starts acting weird, it's probably possessed. Well, I have two cats, and one is a kitten, and then the other one I've had for about a year, and I was doing a lot of black magic around him. And yeah, the little one, she would not leave my side the entire treatment, and he started acting really strange. In fact, she wasn't even hanging out with him, which was weird, which I thought he was maybe jealous of. But she was following me everywhere I went, and she was previously like not the most affectionate. He was so grumpy, biting me, breaking skin. Like, he would literally go on the other side of the room and just stare without blinking in this very creepy way. And he wouldn't let me go near him. It was wild. He was the most cuddly cat prior to this. And I didn't put it together. I thought he was just going through a mood. And then when it was getting worse, I was like, okay. And then I went back and looked at our conversation, and you said, try the treatment on him. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, but if it's not this, I don't want to spray him with the water and further alienate the cat. So I left it. Actually, I put on that. I put on one of those, the Rocky Raku.
Oh yeah, the Rukia, yeah,
Yeah, I
the
put on the
Quranic
Rukia.
recitations.
Totally. One day when I left the house and I put the Rukia on, it was like a 9 hour long Rukia, and I just put it on and left the house. And I was like, we'll see if that takes care of it. And I came back, and then I felt really bad when I was like, oh my God, that was kind of psychotic to leave the cats with the Rukia blasting like that. And I came back and they were just chilling. So I still waited a few more days, and then finally I did the water treatment on him. And I've never seen anything like it. I sprayed him. He just froze. I placed him down on the ground, and he just sat there, kind of just slowly looking around, blinking. He was dazed. It was like he was just stunned. And he didn't move for a while. He just did that. And then he was right back to himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, we love our pets, our companion animals, and we know them. We know their personality. It's like he got into this kind of like cat intimidation tactic,
Yeah.
where he's, like you said, he's just sitting at you. And it's very common in Arabic culture, like to look out for possessed cats, actually.
Okay.
Because even demons can pose as cats.
Ooh.
But in this case, I mean, you've known him, you've had him since he was a child. He definitely wasn't a demon. But
Mhm.
as you said, it tends to happen, and cats are protectors. So that's why they were sacred in ancient Egypt. They can see spirits. There's always the stereotype of the magician with a cat, right? And in the case of your kitten, she was, she really liked the energy that she was seeing from the water treatment. But in the case of your older cat, who has been in contact with some demonic entities, probably at that time he was still trying to protect you, and then they just decided to possess him, because that's another door into your reality in your everyday
Yeah.
life. So he definitely didn't enjoy what you were going through. And I
Right.
appreciate you mentioning about that. I mean, it turns out that cats can use some spiritual healing too. So you never know. If your cat is a pest, maybe. And I do remember us talking about these things as the treatment went along. And as you've experienced, it's not like I give you the treatment, here you go, here are the instructions, God bless you. I keep this support and this link going with my clients, especially throughout the treatment, to make sure that we get to the finish line together. How important was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was invaluable. I mean, it was a very isolating treatment to be going through also because who do I talk to about that? You know, I was purging a lot of stuff, and also it's vulnerable and also painful, the experience of hope sometimes,
Yeah.
because with the acknowledgement of hope comes the acknowledgement of possible failure. And I was trying to walk that very fine line of holding out hope and making sure that I was supporting the treatment, that I wasn't working against the treatment with my emotions, but also creating a cushioning for myself if it didn't work. Because if it didn't work, I knew that there was going to be fallout from that, and it was gonna suck. So so having you there to answer these questions and stuff was, I mean, it was very important. It was really, I really needed it. It was a very scary, lonely process in a lot of ways, but it was also really beautiful.
You're right. It is a lonely thing. And also, one of the main reasons I do that is because I know the spirits are going to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like healing is meant to be fun and sweet, like,
Yeah.
is meant to be difficult. And it's something that I've discussed with you. And you're like, you know what, Retta, from all the things that I've tried, I'm used to the purging. I'm used to this. But is it going to be enough? Like you said before, it's like you have tried many things, but you always felt that the root problem was not treated, was not solved. And that was your main fear. And justifiably, like,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, with everything you've tried, I think it was totally justified. And spirits are really good at making people believe that, you know what, this might be it, and you'll have to deal with it for the rest of your life.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
I thank you for developing on that. And until this day, because the treatment is finished, and
Mm-hmm.
many people get the wrong idea that the water is finished, the treatment is finished. No, it keeps working on you
Yeah.
for a long time, because as your body is regenerating, your energy body is regenerating, your aura field is regenerating, things keep falling into place. And
Yeah.
even from time to time, I'll see this text from you like, the best thing about healing is when that happens, or when
Yeah.
this happens. What are some of the most important improvements that you're seeing in your life in general? What are some of the things that jump to mind immediately with that regard?
The mental peace, I mean, that was the first thing I noticed, and that stayed with me the entire time. The other thing that has really just kind of blown my mind is how I don't really know, I don't really have words to describe the sensation, but it's like a spaciousness or a cleanliness inside my body. There's like I can just stand there or just lay there, and it's the first thing I'm aware of when I wake up in the morning, is like how much more space there is inside of my body, or how clean it feels or something. I don't know. I didn't realize like how I was just like, I feel like maybe my insides were just packed tight with entities or something, really ugly entities. And so there's like a purity there or something. It's
That's
remarkable.
very interesting. From
Yeah.
all the things you've mentioned to me, you never mentioned this one.
I think maybe
um,
that's the closest I've come to describing it. I think I've tried to describe it in other ways, but probably like less accurately. So
I see. I
yeah.
see. There could be many reasons for that. Of course, I mean, you have you literally had spirits living inside your body.
Right.
So that creates tension, which then makes you feel that everything, like you said, is kind of packed tight.
Yeah.
But also, there is something occupying that space. So it is
Right.
full, you see?
Yes.
So, yeah, kind of a double effect there. And I'm glad that you're sharing that with us. But it just goes to show this stuff is not just emotional, mental, it's physical as well at some level when it gets
Absolutely.
enough time to run with you and develop
Mm.
and that it goes unchecked and undiagnosed and
Yeah.
untreated. Because personally, I believe this stuff should be taught in school. And
Yeah.
especially in Western countries, people are completely oblivious to the reality of spirits, compared to Arabic culture or other cultures, which are like very much aware, like, oh, this is a spirit, be careful. But that goes again to the other extreme where everything is a spirit, right? I think there has to be a happy balance in the middle.
Yeah.
And hopefully, we will aim towards that as society changes.
Yes.
Um, Now, we're having conversations about different things. And I mentioned to you privately that when our spirit is healed, we start
Mhm.
to see events and even the people around us in a different light, not just current, but also past sometimes.
Yeah.
What are some observations you've made about people and society in general since
Yeah.
that veil has been lifted from over you?
So I've thought a lot about my past and different people from my past. I realized that my father was, I had always thought my father was a sociopath, but I realized that he was just incredibly possessed. I don't think that there was any of him even left there. So that's been kind of interesting to acknowledge. And I mean, I see that all of my family members are possessed, absolutely. And I see that, I see the symptoms of that in everybody. And it definitely makes me feel differently about them, more compassionate. And different people I've been involved with. I had this memory come back to me of this guy who was a roommate of this girl I knew. And we were living in this place that was like staff housing, basically. This guy was very strange, and I had been working closely with him, and we just saw this change in his personality. She came over to my place one day crying because she'd been home alone with him and she'd heard him speaking in strange languages in a different voice in his bedroom. And then he came out and he walked down the hallway and stood in the doorway of her bedroom, and he had a completely different face and this very demonic grin, and he started laughing and he said he was going to kill her. And I remember we were
When
just,
did it, when did this happen?
this was quite a few years ago. This was like maybe nine years ago or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
if you go to any resource, either be it cops, therapists, psychiatrists, here, take this pill.
Right.
That's how it's going to end up, or maybe chained to a hospital bed, whereas this person really needed
Yeah.
spiritual help.
It's so sad, like I think I go and I look at these posts of these different healers, and I believe a lot of them have good intentions, some of them more than others. And you see all these people in the comments and they're just so broken and sad and searching for solutions and trying to twist themselves into pretzels, trying to apply these solutions, wondering why they aren't working and thinking they're just not trying hard enough. And I just relate so deeply to that. And it's really sad that the new age community, which I spent so much time in, is, I mean, I always knew it was very flawed, but it's strange to me that there's this general acknowledgement of the spirit of a spiritual world, a world that we can't see, and an understanding that we have to respect it and acknowledge it, but it stops short of actually acknowledging the presence uh, of evil spirits and their ability to impact us. And there's just like there's a refusal to acknowledge that in a lot of cases. Like that's just too far. And then we have Freud, who basically, you know what I mean, like anybody who believes in any sort of like spiritual affliction is like, it's a sign of like deep mental disturbances. He did a lot of harm, that guy, honestly. You
Who
know,
I'm sure was dealing with his own spiritual afflictions.
I'm sure he was. Absolutely. He didn't seem like the purest of souls, that's for sure. So it's really sad that, think of all of the people shuffling through these different programs and shuffling through therapist offices and all of the well-meaning healers and therapists who are trying to help them. And the fact that we culturally choose to ignore this stuff is such a disservice. It's tragic, honestly. And I really hope that stops. I mean, I'm very lucky to have a therapist who's just like totally dived into this with me. She has a Latin American background, so she kind of grew up understanding that, that there was some sort of spiritual world, and then came to kind of deny it as an adult, but she's like right back into it. And I think she's going through her own personal journey of rediscovering things. And I'm really grateful to have her. And I do wonder how it's going to inform her practice, because it's not like she as a therapist can now just start telling people that they're probably possessed and they should go get treatment for it, because that would put her in a compromising situation. But I do wonder
Yeah.
if she's going to start to maybe feel frustrated in her therapy practice if she does see that it's a spiritual affliction and she feels unable to recommend that. And the thing that I have each day, I'm feeling better and better and better since this treatment's ended. And just when I can't feel any better. And it's not that, like today was like, I kind of felt very blah today, but it's not like I'm expecting to no longer have a human experience. It's just that I can have a more grounded human experience where I'm not constantly being influenced by these things. And I'm totally down for that. I'm totally down for normal bad days. Bring them on. Doing all this stuff, it's basically like I was training for a marathon on sand, and
Yeah.
now I hit the pavement.
That's very well said. And the bad makes the good even better and more enjoyable.
Yes.
But right now, you're at the level where you can very much differentiate between a normal bad day and a demonically bad day.
Yes.
Um, and something that you mentioned that I want to touch on, and this is the real reason that we're doing this interview, is raising people's awareness about the spirit world. Yes,
Yes.
there are spirits, but to say that they're all good or nature spirits is like saying there are only good people in the world, which
Yes.
is so far from the truth. And this is why we have decided to do this interview, because there are so many people out there like, yeah, the spirits of nature and the spirits of the trees and the spirits of that. Well, there are also spirits of hate, spirits of jealousy, spirits of greed, spirits of all sorts of evil things
Yeah.
who are interacting with our society, with all facets of human life.
Yeah.
And people just seem to attribute that to human nature.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a part of human nature, but there's also a spiritual influence. And I thank you for touching on that. And going back to what you're talking about, being part of the New Age community, I mean, you've come across many people, some more spiritual than others. And what happened when you raised the topic of spirits, demons, spiritual afflictions? What happens? What is the general reaction you get from people?
I don't raise it that often. Unless I'm in a one-on-one conversation with somebody, then you can usually get them to kind of accept things in a different way, because people tend
Yeah.
to be a little bit more open-minded if it's just like two of you, because they want to relate with you in that regard. But there's pushback. There's this idea that you're trying to find like some sort of easy way out, or you're not putting in enough work, or it's just too ugly and negative. I mean, obviously the spiritual community we know is like spiritual bypassing is real, and definitely is overruns the spiritual community and the new age community. And as much as there's like a rejection of all types of shadow, they think they're accepting the shadow because they talk about shadow work, but ultimately they don't want anything that's too messy, because then it's negative. And then if you're thinking in a negative space, you're going to attract negative things. And you think of like Abraham Hicks, for example, who talks about how every single bad thing that's happening to us is being generated by our own brains. First of all, it's like a grouping of spirits speaking through her, and she's the creepiest woman. She's so creepy, that woman. But what kind of pressure is that to put on somebody to tell them that everything that's happening in their reality is being generated by their own mind? And, there's this obsession with doing everything on your own in the spiritual community that's unrealistic. It's like, I should be able to outthink this. I should be able to outwork this. I should be able to change my mindset and make the right moves. And yes, personal responsibility is a beautiful fucking thing. And sometimes we have to go about learning that in difficult ways. We don't want to be people who are blaming our exterior world and refusing to take responsibility for ourselves. So, I mean, it's those two contradictions kind of exist in a parallel way, right? And so I think that people can kind of waver back and forth between the two and become very confused. And I mean, there's a lot of examples of this in our lives, of these contradictions of wanting to feel secure, but also needing freedom. And those things are at odds with each other. So it's like taking personal accountability for your life and not blaming the world around you, while also at the same time acknowledging that things exist outside of our control.
It's like people are trying to fight the victim mentality, but then they go to the extreme again, which is everything is your fault. But I've had clients who have had very horrible experience even as children. I mean, when you're a child, you're this diamond shining jewel of love, and obviously you're not thinking any evil thoughts and you're not manifesting those evil experiences in your life. But if you were born with a demonic attachment because your mother had a demonic attachment while you were in her womb, and this stuff is following you all along,
right?
It's not because you manifested it. Mm-hmm. And I think the line has to be drawn, and I hope our listeners are paying close attention to this, when it's something that is completely out of your control and it's a pattern that keeps repeating over and over again. Yes, you might be thinking unhealthy thoughts and having a toxic monologue. You might be doing that. But when it comes to external circumstances, of other people, that even if you do something that's good, it gets misinterpreted. Mm-hmm. And this pattern keeps repeating over and over and over again. I mean, you can only think so many negative thoughts to make it happen day in, day out.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right in the fact that people, yes, we want to accept responsibility, but we want to accept responsibility to the point where something external could be happening. And that's also as valid or even more valid a reason to be going through a tough time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thank you for touching on that, because it's very sad. Like you said yourself, imagine you're someone who has a real genuine issue, and you listen to this lady, you said, Mrs. Hicks, who's telling you this is all your fault, and as you said, that she is talking to her own spirits who are telling you this.
Yeah.
What kind of spirits do you think are those?
Yeah.
Right? Are they the good kinds of spirits? Are they the spirits who are going to tell you like, hey, you should think about making a prayer or, seeking some help? Those are not the kinds of spirits. So many times I see that even the healers or the spiritual leaders, they need their own healing before they could even advise anything to other people.
Yeah.
Now, you have been part of the scene, and you have mentioned getting into black magic, because this is how things usually go in this field. It's like you get into spirituality, this and that, crystals and all this metaphysical stuff, meditation. Then at some point starts going into magic, like you want to get something done, you want to manifest a certain result. You mentioned black magic. What kind of paths did you explore? What kind of disciplines do you practice, and why?
I was using the Gallery of Magic books, and then, I'm a little embarrassed to say, I'm very embarrassed of my entire magical experience. the self-practiced stuff because it was so careless. I was just like a kid playing with explosive devices, like, oh, this looks cool. It's I wasn't doing it to be cool. I was doing it to get results, but there was such a disrespect for how powerful the tools were. And I think it's because a part of me didn't fully believe it. It's like the only reason you'd play with explosive devices is if you didn't think they had the chance to hurt you. And so I use the term chaos magic quite literally. I would Google things and, just sometimes I had results. Honestly, those honey jar spells, those are, wow, what simple and incredibly effective. So that's not black magic. But the stuff I was using for darker magic was just, yeah, like all of those Gallery of Magic books and, cursing people. And I was telling you the other day, not so long ago, I think it was just last year, I had a curse list of all these people from my past that had really hurt me, grudges I was holding on to for far too long that I just couldn't shake, and memories of the wrongdoings that these people had committed against me still so fresh and so painful. And I had this long list of all the people that I was going to curse. And it obviously takes an incredible amount of energy and you have to conjure up an incredible amount of hate just to get through a cursing ritual. And at least the ones I was doing. And I remember looking at this list and how daunting it was. And I was just like, okay,
This feels like work.
This feels like work. Buckle up, buckle up, buckle up, kid.
I need to sleep in tonight because I have 5 people to curse tomorrow.
Exactly.
Sorry, guys, can't go out. Got some cursing to do.
Yes. I remember the first time I made contact with Lucifer. That was a trip. So I had this was not a Gallery of Magic book, but it was like the path workings, demons of, you basically do these path workings to make contact. And I made contact and it was such a strong and visceral experience. And I had this headache come on like I've never felt. Like I was freaked the fuck out. Oh my gosh. I was like, what have I done? And then I just went on, I sat and I meditated with it. I went and looked at things that people had to say about it to like ease my fear. And then I sat and I meditated on it. And then I remember just feeling this like peace come in that I had done the right thing. And that was like my first, and now I understand that how influenced I was to feel that peace. And I'm just ashamed, honestly, of that chapter.
Well, I don't think there's a reason to be ashamed, and the fact that you're also talking about it and sharing with other people is very important. I mean, the Gallery of Magic is a phenomenon. It created a revolution in the magical world.
Yeah.
And I am all for innovating, making magic more accessible. I mean, that's even what I do for people in regards to Arabic magic. But there was a reason people were fasting, praying, going to confession, getting swords, all these tools, tracing circles. It's not because they were crazy or paranoid.
Yeah.
Like those guys are not our friends. If like you said yourself, you're going to play with an explosive device, the only reason you would do it is because you didn't know it could explode in your hand.
Yes.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing about that. Now, by God's grace, your issues are solved. And I'm so grateful to him, to his angels and his good spirits for helping you and helping me help other people such as yourself. And we're still working together now, not only to rebuild, but also to get you to that next level, to reach new heights.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your life currently? And, what is your outlook on the future?
Yeah. So I'm already noticing, like I was actually out at an event last night and there were probably about 75 people there and we were on a boat. So like 4 hours, we were all on a boat together. So the same people for 4 hours, 75 of them. And I mean, it was really remarkable. There would always, I mean, normally in the past, um, at, you know, the 1 hour mark, there would have been a large majority of those people who would have made up their mind that they don't like me and would not have been afraid to show that through body language. And, you know, it's, I didn't experience any of that last night. It was like people were so like open and friendly and wanting to approach me. And it was a little overwhelming, to be honest.
Whether it's for spiritual healing, divination, or genuine wish granting, goal manifesting, truly life changing magic, the name is Reda Rohani. Talk to me.
Now I've developed, you know, there's going to be a whole relearning to allow
Yeah, another skill set to
another
master of
skill set.
actually of
Absolutely.
actually dealing with people wanting to approach you, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
That's understandable. And you know what I tell my clients is like, look, up to this point, you've had these spirits actively sabotaging your life
Mhm.
from inside out.
Yeah,
We're gonna do this treatment, we're gonna reset you so you become a normal person, having, you know, life won't be perfect, but
yeah,
it will be not demonically imperfect.
yes,
And then, of course, for the people who are willing to go beyond, is we could work together. So you see the other side of the coin, which is instead of spirits sabotaging you, actually driving you up, helping you, you know, move forward and really accelerating your progress, kind of
yeah,
like making up for lost time,
yeah,
because we do have to catch up, especially when we deal with, like you said yourself, you know, practicing for a marathon on sand. Now, if
mhm,
you finish a treatment, you obviously don't want to get into that situation ever again. You know, most people, they're like, Greta, you know, I want to work prosperity. I'm like, hey, prosperity is good, but we want to make sure we avoid you getting into this again. So we worked for
yeah,
protection.
yeah,
Then we did some financial stuff. And also we worked on some personal issues that you had. Now, everything, you know, is changing for the better.
yeah,
You know, this is a question that I get asked a lot, which is about results.
yeah.
Is, you know, people, when they commission something from me, they're like, how long will it be till I see results? So, in your experience, and from everything we've done together in the past, how long was it for you to see results? And of course, were you satisfied with those results?
The first one we did together, as I mentioned, like the results were immediate and very strong. And we've done the treatment, which is remarkable. We did the protection, which I can really feel. I mean, I could feel when you gave it to me and I activated it. And you also did another one for me for something that was like a little bit more, it was kind of like a one of my more superficial asks. And that one we did, and that happened within like the exact time frame that you said. I mean, it was really something to see, like, to the day. And then a lot of the other things that we're working on are things that are going to take time to manifest. They're things that are also hard to measure a little bit when we're dealing with internal stuff. So, but I mean, I feel like I'm on a really good track here, and I can feel that I'm going to be stepping on that moving walkway that I already am, and that things are going to accelerate really quickly. And I'm so, you know, I was just marveling yesterday about the fact that all this time I've thought I had PTSD, and I don't have PTSD anymore. All of that work that I put in all those years to deal with PTSD, guess what? It was effective. I worked through PTSD. So
It really worked.
it worked. So that's good. So like I think back on my past now, and I think about these things that happened to me, and sure, I was a little emotional mentioning them earlier in the interview, but like ultimately, like I don't feel that they're running my life anymore. So this was not PTSD this that I had. This was a spiritual affliction. This was like demons getting in my ear and like reminding me of everything awful that ever happened to me in my life and giving me very intense visuals, and of course that's going to make anybody feel terrible about their past. And now I really feel like my past is where it belongs. It's in the past. And I feel that all of these tools that I've been learning, like as I mentioned to you, I had like one of my best meditations ever the other day. I was able to actually meditate, which I have been so cut off from. Forget about it. Like meditating, like forget about it. Like I couldn't focus to save my life. In fact, I hadn't even actually even really been able to practice much magic because I wasn't able to more recently because I hadn't been able to focus long enough to be effective in any way. And so all of these tools that I cultivated, like I feel like I can actually use them in my life in the way that they're meant to be used and actually get results. And then the work that I'm doing with you and the fact that I feel like all of the gifts that the universe has been wanting to send my way all of these years are finally going to start to flow in. I know that, I know that, I know that life has been trying to gift me things and they haven't been able to come through. And I feel that they will be able to come through now. I feel like they've been waiting to come through.
Very interesting that you mentioned that, because your blessings are going to come regardless. And they were blocked for such a long time. They are going to come regardless. And, sometimes we could just accelerate that process.
Yeah.
We don't create new blessings. We just attract them because God is the one who blesses. You mentioned something about being a superficial ask. I wouldn't have done it if it was superficial, to be honest. But also, there's a level of magic where, like, okay, Red, I would like you to do magic for me, and this is what I want. Where it's like, okay, I'm looking to influence a certain person. And I thought it was very important in your situation to do that.
It was.
That's when magic, I think, gets really serious, where it's like, okay, this is another person. We need to influence this person to do a certain type of thing. And that's, I think, when, a magician worth their medal can actually be able to do that and make it happen. It's not something that I'm willing to do very often.
Mm-hmm.
And I get all types of requests that I reject all the time. But when it's justified and when it's for a good cause, I'm willing to do it. And I'm glad that you saw the results that you were seeking, because we didn't do anything wrong. And I really think it was important. Now, so far, from the healing, magic, we've been working together. What have you been most impressed with and why?
Well, the treatment's been life-changing. So that's the obvious answer. I mean, I'm still blown away by how quickly the things manifested with the guy and how that all played out. The universe was very like, really wanting to come through you for that one. Like that one had been, they'd been wanting that message to come through for a while. And they were so relieved when you came into the picture. I could feel that. They're just like, fucking finally, let's get this message across to this girl.
Well, I mean, you did ask for something specific. And thing is, what I love about magic is sometimes like getting someone neutral to look over your situation, like a fresh pair of eyes. So the spirits come and they're like, okay, we know what's in that person's heart. We know what's in that person's heart. We know what they're saying behind their back. Like they know so much more than we actually do. And it falls on the choice of spirits, but also having the right charge for the results to manifest in that way. So it's a multifaceted thing, but I'm glad that you got the manifestation you were looking for, which is not exactly what you were looking for, but it ended up being better. And that's when, we get really appreciative of the spirits and just how much they bring to the table. So yeah, I thank you for sharing about that, and all things taken into consideration. We met about maybe 2 months ago. Time, energy, money spent. Was it all worth it for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was this feeling of this deep emptiness, almost like being at the bottom of a very deep well, and that like everything's really like muffled and the light is so far away, and it's like you're so far away from freedom. I don't really know how to put into words the place I was in. It was just like the most depraved place I was coming into in myself, just such pain and such isolation and just this hopelessness that was starting to creep in. And I just honestly, I don't I don't know how I could have continued living like that. Like it was too much. It's too awful. So yeah, I mean, it's still pinch me moments that I'm truly on the other side of this nightmare, this like lifelong nightmare. Um, it's I'm really grateful.
And I am too. All gratitude to God, the highest and greatest. And you said something that really touched me right now is that you were at the bottom of this well and you describe it so well. Um, there are people listening to us right now
Mhm.
who feel the same way. Those people, they practice magic, thinking it will solve their problems, or they spend thousands upon thousands of dollars going from one spiritual healer to another. Others have just given up and decided, you know what, this is my luck of the draw. What do you want to tell those people listening to us right now?
If there are patterns showing up in your life and you've actually done work to get over them, you know how people like to say, well, if you're the common denominator and there's bad things that are happening to you over and over and over again that you can't explain, and you're feeling like, I'm so confused because the message is, well, I am the common denominator here, but this feels outside of my control. And I feel like I have made legitimate efforts to grow and to change and to shift my situation, but those patterns are still showing up. Please seek help for a spiritual affliction, because this stuff is real. This stuff is super destructive. And there are people who are living and dying with this, never knowing. And I never would have imagined I'd go back to feeling so biblical about things, but like truly they hide, and they're tricksters and they're liars, and they can really do a number on us, and they're fucking running our world right now. I think greed, the greed gins are winning the race right now. They are on fire.
Yeah,
um, but yeah, seek help and only listen to the message that it's all your fault for so long. You know, yeah, that's what I'd say.
that's very well said. I mean, because you have all these people,
Hmm.
different cultures are like, oh, it's evil eye, it's jinn, it's black magic, it's this, someone's done this to me. And
Right.
then you have all the other people who are staring at the problem in the face, but they can't recognize it,
Yeah.
and it's again a case of balancing both extremes. And I don't know why us human beings we tend towards extremes all
Mhm.
the time, but it's just like you can take only so much responsibility for what is happening in your life. And I think everything internal, you can deal with it to a certain extent. But when it
Yeah.
becomes external, when it becomes other people, circumstances, and it just feels like you're being singled out by the universe,
Yes.
then you really have to kind of look at alternative solutions.
Yeah.
And
And that's key. And that's a very specific feeling that you get when you have this, is like you're being singled out. And that can
exactly.
look like being singled out by people, by situations, but it feels like being singled out constantly.
Yes. Yes. Sometimes things can go wrong towards us.
Yeah.
But when you have that feeling of it's like, why always me and
Yeah.
no one else?
Yes.
That's when you have to ask yourself some serious questions. And as you said very well, Jessa, are not only living and dying with this, I have met people who are actually born with this. So they don't even have a baseline to
Yeah.
establish a normal life. And they just feel and go throughout life thinking that something is wrong with me, but they can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, for their own sakes, and if it's not with me, could be with anyone else, just do it. And that's why we did this interview, to raise people's attention, their awareness to the fact that, hey, spirits exist. Not all of them are just good or benevolent or spirits of nature or whatever. And as you said, the spirits of greed. I mean, we do have greed within us, but of course, it's heightened to a level that is too extreme in our society. And in many cases, when we look at society, we see that, demonic influence is very, very present, from movies to music to all the content. It's out there and it's real. It's very palpable at this point. So I thank you for sharing with us really everything you did. I mean, from very personal stuff, hurtful experiences that you had to kind of relive for the purpose of this interview. And I think our listeners will really appreciate how candidly you have shared about everything. Just thank you on behalf of our listeners, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Retta.